Okay, so good morning everybody. So I was asked this week to change my topic. Last few weeks we discussed, last few shurim we were discussing about the different milchamot, and I was asked to speak about Tu B'Shvat today. So it's a bit of a change, but we'll try to put it in the perspective of what we're going through and how we understand Tu B'Shvat. Now, to understand Tu B'Shvat, we have to, in actual fact, look at it from two perspectives. The first perspective, which we've got to look at it, is simply what we used to do when I grew up in England. I imagine when you grew up in America, wherever you grew up. What?
England, most of the people.
Okay, most of the people in England. Okay, what did we do? We didn't used to say Tachnun, big deal. The school kids, that was great, it made davening shorter, etc., etc. And then you used to have a bit of a few dried fruits and everything, which nothing came from Israel. Okay, and that's what there was. That was Tu B'Shvat. Obviously in Eretz Yisrael it completely changes. Our whole perspective changes. And one of the things which Rav Kook did when he began understanding the depths of understanding the wide macro systems of the Torah, one of the things which he did was he decided to write short verses, short poems on every month of the year. Every month of the year he used to write short poems, 2-3 lines, to focus on the concept of these particular months. Now obviously he took it from the vast writings of the great Hasidic rabbis going back to the Baal HaTanya, etc., and Chazal, but he encompassed it in an amazing way. And one of my great teachers who taught me how to learn Rav Kook, Rav Uzi Kalchaim Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, wrote a commentary on these three lines of Rav Kook. He called it Be'er Meged Yerachim. That was the name of the book which he wrote on the little short verses of Rav Kook on each month. And we're going to just take one of them. And on the top of the line, now, before I carry on, I need to apologize. Because in the middle of the week, beginning of this week, Daniela wrote to me and asked me whether I'd give translations, pages in English. Something I never do. It's bad enough that I give it in English. Okay, even though, as I said, I'm born in England. But I never wanted to ever give shiurim once I came to Eretz Yisrael, but I know it's necessary. But definitely not source sheets. And I've just been in South Africa for 2 years. And when I left, a few people came up to me, because also there, I never gave source sheets in English. The only time I used to give translations of English, when we learned Tanakh, and there, when we learned Iyov or something like that, then I felt there's a necessity to give the translation. And people came up to me afterwards and said, because I never ever gave translations in English, they had to read the Hebrew with me, and it improved their Hebrew. So that's why I'm not giving translations. What? Right, okay. Everybody's got commentary on that. Let's leave it. Okay, so Rav Kook says the following. He says in line number 5, and we called it Pitgam Haraya L'Chodesh Shvat, the statement of Rav Kook on Chodesh Shvat, top of the page, opposite line number 5. Mata'e atzei pri aladmot kodesh, planting fruit trees on the land of Holy Land. Yafricho will be able to spring forth tikvat, the hope of Dorim, generations. Which means to say that the first people, and he arrived in Eretz Israel in 1910, approximately, 1908, already he saw in different places trees being planted. And he realized that the more trees that are planted in Eretz Israel, they will create the eventual redemption of Am Yisrael. Our relationship to Eretz Israel has the impact on the future of the people of Israel. Please. Right. Now, where did he get this from? What were the sources? Now, the concept which Rav Kook did, like many other people, he never gave sources. Very rarely did he give sources. Half of his books, we don't realize where everything came from. It's a matter of some people write this way, some people write that way. But Rav Kook, please. So what were the sources of Rav Kook? Where did he get it from? Now, one of the sources is brought in the following, in Sefer Yecheskel. It's the Haftarah of Parshat Parah, which we're going to read soon in a month and a half. V'atem harei Yisrael, you mountains of Israel, anfeichem titenu, give forth your branches, uperichem tisa'u, and your fruit uplift l'ami Yisrael, ki kervu lavo, because the time is coming closer. Redemption. Yecheskel in Perek Lamed Vav speaks about, after the valley of the dry bones, he speaks about the future of Eretz Yisrael. Now, Yecheskel lived in Bavel. He was the only prophet who basically prophesied outside Eretz Yisrael. And even though Chazal come and tell us that prophecy did not take place in Eretz Yisrael because he prophesied for the sake of Eretz Yisrael, that is why his prophecy is written in the Kitvei HaKodesh. All the other prophets all lived in Eretz Yisrael, with the exception of Yecheskel. Yecheskel never lived. He left Eretz Yisrael when he was a young boy in the first exile of Yehoiachim. And all his prophecies took place in Babylon. And the only reason the Kuzari says, and the Rambam also brings it, is because his prophecy related to Eretz Yisrael. And he says, with all the troubles which you in Eretz Yisrael, and his prophecy, he prophesied on the Churban Bayit, on the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the exiles of Am Yisrael. He said it'll eventually come back. And that's why the last 10 chapters of Sefer Yecheskel speak about the description of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Those are the last 10 chapters of Sefer Yecheskel. And now Brabanel says the following. V'atem, in line number 10. V'atem, Harei Yisrael, mountains of Israel. Sheme'et hagalut, from the time of Galut, Hayitem mekulalim, all you trees were cursed. Umitkalkalim tvotechem, and all your produce has been damaged. Be'et gulati, the time when I will redeem Eretz Yisrael, anfeichem titenu, your branches will give fruit, uprichem tisu ki yamim rishonim. Lefi shetiyeh hatvua v'atov la'amo Yisrael, because the produce is good for the Jewish people. Now, ki, says Abrabanel, ki hinei, Ka'asher galu min haaretz, when Am Yisrael were exiled from the land, nitkalkalu atvuot, all the produce became rotten. Lefi shayu mechuvanot me'ashkacha elokit, because this was directed from divine providence. We know, Eretz Yisrael, nobody ever managed to grow things here. This country, agriculturally, did not exist for approximately 2,000 years. Nobody grew anything here. All of a sudden, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Jews will come back, they will begin to plant, the fruits of the land will develop. That's a historical fact. And Abrabanel says this is the explanation of the prophecy of Yechezkel. Only when the Jewish people live in Eretz Yisrael, then Eretz Yisrael can bring forth its produce. Okay? V'lachen, b'shuvchem al admat kodesh, the minute you begin to return to Eretz Yisrael, yashuvu hatvuot lebirchatam. The produce will return to their having their blessing. Kivan, says the Abrabanel, shehem la'mo Yisrael, because they belong to the people of Israel. Okay, Abrabanel writes this when he is in Portugal. Okay, Abrabanel was perhaps one of the greatest commentaries on the Tanakh. He was exiled about 4 times in his life, even though he became the Ministry of Finance of Spain, Portugal, etc., etc. And he's got these most fascinating introductions on his commentary on Tanakh. Some of them, he didn't know where they, once he was expelled from Portugal the second time, he didn't know where half of his writings were. And he arrived in Malta. And in Malta he met one of his pupils who had the only manuscript of his commentary on, I think it's Hosea. Okay, he actually dies in Italy and he's buried in Padova. Okay, he traveled the whole world, unfortunately, because of all the different exiles. And he speaks about it many, many times, his attitude to all different things which took place in his period in the expulsion of Spain. And based on this pasuk, says Rabbi Abba, very famous phrase, V'amar Rabbi Abba, line number 15, Ein lecha ketz megule mizu. There's no actually revelation of the end of time than this pasuk. Shne'emar, as it's written, V'atem harei Yisrael, anfechem titenu upirichem tisul ami Yisrael. And Rashi says, when Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael begin giving its fruits, then you know that's the Geula. That's the beginning of redemption. And that's what Rav Kook says. When people, Jewish people, will actually begin to plant trees in Eretz Yisrael, and they will succeed, and we see it in our generation, from Metula down to Eilat, doesn't make any difference where you are in Eretz Yisrael, you will see Simanei Geula, signs of redemption. And hence, Tu B'Shvat,
and it's true.
I know it's true, I wouldn't say it otherwise, okay? Only we see it, okay? We, in actual fact, see it. So you can say, okay, when I imagine some of you came, I know when I came, okay, all the whole of the middle of Eretz Yisrael was just full of fruit orchards. Now you go down south in the Negev and you see it full of tomatoes and full of peppers and full of this, and it's just amazing. So I'm saying those are signs of Geula. So henceforth,
Mark Twain.
What?
Say,
Mark Twain said it. Yeah.
Also
Where do you got it from?
commented how desolate.
Eretz
he was
Yisrael.
shocked.
Yeah, of
He
course.
was absolutely
Yeah.
shocked. He's the testimony.
Right. Let's carry on. So where does all this take us? This all takes us to a very famous statement of one of the greatest rabbis of Hungary, Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer was the Rav of Pressburg and Bratislavia, and often he's pictured amongst Haredi sources, and I'm saying I'm a Haredi also, so don't worry about that, okay? As somebody who didn't look in a way which we think is correct in inverted commas, okay? But in actual fact, his great pupils all came to Eretz Yisrael. Pupils of the Chassam Sofer came to Eretz Yisrael at the same time as the pupils of the Vilna Gaon. And he's got a fascinating statement which he brings in the name of his great teacher, the Baal Hafla'ah, who was a pupil of the Vilna Gaon. And it's based on a Gemara which says the following, a very famous Gemara in line number 20. Tanu Rabbanan. Gemara says, V'asafta deganecha. You've got to gather the produce of your land. We say that 3 times a day in Shema. Ma Talmud lomar. What's he telling us? Lefi shene'emar lo yamush sefer haTorah ze mipicha. because it says on the other side that you must sit and learn the whole day. Lo yamush se'er atomicha yachol dvarayim kichtavam. Should it that be literally taken that you don't do anything? Talmud lomar v'asafta deganecha hanhegahem derech eretz divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, you've got to have the balance. Learning Torah and v'asafta deganecha. I'm not going to carry on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai because we're not going to go into that, but a fascinating statement of the Chassam Sofer on this. Line number 30. Nira lefi aniyut dati, Rabbi Shmuel nami lo amar mikra v'asafta deganecha. When did he say there's a mitzvah of v'asafta deganecha? Ela be'eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael. V'rov Yisrael shoyim. And when Am Yisrael living in Eretz Yisrael. Sha'avodah bekarka, working on the land, gufa, mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. Mishum yeshiva Eretz Yisrael. Ulotzi peirot hakadoshim. And to take out its holy fruits. V'al zeh tzivta Torah v'asafta deganecha. This is what it's talking about. Where's it written v'asafta deganecha? והיה אם שמוע תשמעו מצוותי אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום, לעבוד את אשריכם ולעבדו בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם, ונתתי גשמיכם בעיתם, etc., etc. Right? So where's he talking about? It's not talking about in Chutz La'aretz, it's talking about in Eretz Yisrael. And he says, Uboaz, what was Boaz doing? Zoreh goren hasorim halayla. Boaz, when he was in the threshing floor, what was he doing? Says the Chassam Sofer, he was keeping a mitzvah. Mishum mitzvah. Uke'ilu tomar, and this is the most amazing statement. Uke'ilu tomar, and you're going to say to yourself, Lo aniach tefillin, mipnei shani osek b'Torah. The person who learns Torah doesn't have to put on tefillin. Obviously he's got to put on tefillin. And the same thing, Hachinami, lo yomar, lo esof dgani mipnei esek haTorah. Because I'm busy learning, I shouldn't be busy planting and working on the ground. So Chassam Sofer here states that what? Working on the ground, building up Eretz Yisrael is as important as what? Putting on tefillin. In the same way as putting on tefillin doesn't push aside the mitzvah of learning Torah, so the building up of Eretz Yisrael also doesn't push aside the mitzvah of learning Torah. That's the balance of Rabbi Yishmael. Hachinami, lo yomar lo esof dgani mipnei esek haTorah. Ve'efshar, and he comes along and says, afilu sharei umanuyot, sheyesh behem yishuv ha'olam, hakol bichlal mitzvah. It's not only agriculture, it's actually building up Eretz Yisrael in every system. Whether it's agriculture, whether it's computers, whether it's in any economics, logistics, name it. Says the Chassam Sofer, doing all these things in Eretz Yisrael is what? Is a mitzvah just like putting on tefillin. And Rabbi Yishmael, when he said the balance, correct, we have to balance everything. Aval k'sha'anu mufuzarim, when you are scattered amongst the umot ha'olam, kol shemarbe ha'olam yishuv mosif avodat Hashem, etc., etc., modeh Rabbi Shmuel l'Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. There, in Chutz La'aretz, he says, the more ruchnius, the more spiritual things you do, that keeps Am Yisrael. But he says, in Eretz Yisrael, it's not only spiritual things, it's not only just learning Torah, it's actually building up Eretz Yisrael. That, guys, is an introduction. And that's what Rav Kook meant. When you see Eretz Yisrael being built up, in every parameter, you know that what? These are signs of Geula. That's our first insight of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is not just not saying Tachanun. It's a whole attitude towards our perception of Eretz Yisrael. Because Tu B'Shvat relates to basically Eretz Yisrael. That's introduction number one. Let's go to introduction number two. Introduction number two is the following. The first thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates in the world after he creates matter, soil, the land which he created for us, first thing he does is what? Agriculture. Let's start off. Line number 35. Vayomer Elokim Datshe haaretz deshe. Let the land bring forth deshe. We call green material. Grass, cabbage, lettuce, Brussels sprouts, whatever you want. All the leafy vegetables. Next, Esev Mazria Zera. Material or plants which have a seed inside them, which is wheat, barley, all the types of plants which have seeds inside them. So therefore you have deshe, leafy vegetables. Then you have vegetables which have the seed inside them, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc., etc. And then you have etz pri oseh pri lemino asher zarobo al haaretz. Then you have trees. 3 different types of vegetables, fruits which grow from the ground. Deshe, zera, etz. Vatotzeh haaretz deshe, eseh mazri deshe. And the ground brings out this deshe. And it also brings out eseh mazria zera, lemineo, different types of vegetables, wheat, barley, etc., etc. Veitz osepri, asher zarobo al haaretz. Vayar Elokim kitov. Okay? Let's look inside how David HaMelech describes this. In Perek Borchi Nafshi, which we say on Rosh Chodesh, it says the following. Matzmiach chatzir libheima. He brings out chatzir. Chatzir is the vegetables, the food which animals eat. Ve'esev la'avodat ha'adam, and special types of plants which is for the sake of a man. Lotzi lechem min haaretz. So what is this deshe for really? It's for animals to eat. What are the plants like wheat, barley, etc., etc.? They are for making bread for the man. V'yayin yisamach levav enosh. And the, what's it called? Grape, vineyard. They are for making wine. Latzil panim mishamen. V'lechem levav enosh yisad. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has this plan. Once he's created what we call the domem, the ground, the metals, all the chemicals which exist in the soil, then he goes to the next stage, someach, for vegetables. And then that is for chai, for the animals. And then comes Adam, domem, someach, chai, medaber, what we call it. It's a whole system of creation. We have the silent things, which are basically soil elements, etc., etc. Then we have the plants, then we have the living creatures, and then we have man. And you go up and up and up. Says the Malbi in the most beautiful way. Ata yisaper et hanivra biyom shlishi. Amar, he said, Tachei haaretz deshe, esed mazria zera, ve'etz pri oseh pri, shem shlosha minim. Deshe, grass. Shehu hitlabshut haaretz ba'asavim. The land is covered with grass, leafy vegetables. Sherubam, the majority, hem lemachal behema. Va'al ze amar matzmiach chatzir lebehema. David HaMelech is trying to explain to us the depths of creation. We once spoke about it, that the Tanakh, the Nevi'im and Ketuvim, are the greatest first commentators on Torah. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us in the Torah, the Nevi'im begin to explain to us. So so David HaMelech is telling us, what is the objective of this deshe? The objective is deshe is to give life to animals. Then comes the next stage. Esev mazriya zera. Shehem asavim hanizra'im bidei adam. You need the seeds for man to plant. Grass, weeds, etc., grow naturally. But sowing, wheat, etc., that needs man to plant. And you need seeds for that. Right? V'achashuv mehem chameshet minei ha'da'agan. She'osim mehem lechem, etc. And then you have the trees. So therefore you have three systems. And that is inherent in the creation. Now what's quite amazing is the following, something we don't notice often. But we have many different brochas. We have brochas for vegetables. What is the brocha you make? Ha'adama. Then you have etz. Then you have mezonot, which is what? Which is for wheat, which has been processed. Because if a person will chew wheat, a plant of wheat on its own, what bracha will he make? Ha'adama. If you put out a piece of wheat and you begin to chew it by itself, you'll make ha'adama on it. But there are processes which man needs to do after he planted it, where the bracha goes higher and higher. So therefore you have ha'adama, you have ha'etz, and then you have what? Mezonot, and then you have lechem. And you have gefen. Now, what are the concepts behind it? When you say birchas hamazon, you don't differentiate between all the foods you've eaten. You say one big brocha. The first brocha is based on what? On different tastes. Each food has its own specific taste. Okay? The vegetables have their taste. The fruits have their taste. Mezonot have their taste. Shehakol has got his taste. But let's look in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the following. Keitzad mevorchim al aperos, line number 60. Al perot ha'ilan, on fruits of the tree, omer boruch borei peri ha'etz. Chutz min ha'yayin. Yayin gets a special brocha, shal hayayin omer borei peri ha'gafen. V'al perot ha'aretz, vegetables, omer borei peri ha'adama. Chutz min ha'pat, with the exception of bread, shal ha'pat omer tzei lechem min ha'aretz. V'al ha'yirakot, on vegetables, borei peri ha'adama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Borei minei deshaim. Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says there's another category. Leafy vegetables. Lettuces, okay, cabbage, all the vegetables which are green vegetables. On all of those which don't have seeds inside them, because they have a different taste, says Rabbi Yehuda. Here we have, guys, the pasuk. Let's go back to the pasuk. We said at the beginning. We said at the beginning in line number 35. Tadshei haaretz deshe. Basically, all this deshe is used for animals. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave man the ability to differentiate between different types of leafy vegetables. Lettuce. Okay, just imagine Popeye wouldn't have existed without spinach. Okay? You remember Popeye and Pluto and Olive? Right. What? Okay? What? He did. Popeye made a special brocha. Just imagine yourself. Okay, one of the questions which I had, I'm just telling you this as an insight as an older person, one of the greatest kashas I had on Popeye was, after he was beaten up by Pluto, he managed to get a can and squeeze it, and all the spinach came out. And as a young boy I understood, if the guy's been smashed up, how did he have the energy to get hold of a can and the whole thing opens up? Good kasha. Okay? This even flows. Okay, right. Okay, guys.
There's a nest.
Okay, but so that's what happens. Spinach is a green, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, what bracha would you make on it? Borei minei d'sha'im, because it has a different taste than other vegetables. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda looked in the ground, and he saw that within ha'adamah we have to differentiate. The differentiation is leafy vegetables, which are similar to grass, which basically is the need of what? Of animals. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed man to delve into the secrets of the ground and create things which are lettuces, spinach, cabbages, etc., sprouts.
But are you supposed to make a...
No, we don't paskin like that, like Rabbi Yehuda. We don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. But I'm saying, in his insight, he understands that the different types of what the pasuk actually is telling us creates for us different brochas. But the concept of the first brocha is different tastes. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. He plants within the ground different energies. Energies which are known as leafy vegetables, grass, plants which need sowing and reaping, and then trees. That's all potential, because there's one thing missing. Let's go now to the next pasuk. The next pasuk is the following. After the creation, 6 days of creation, then we have another, chapter 2, which Rav Soloveitchik speaks about in great detail. What do we need Perik 2 for? Which is also the creation of man. But there the following pasuk says, V'chol siach hasadeh, line number 65. V'chol siach hasadeh terim yeh ba'aretz. All the plants of the field were all in the ground. They were ready. V'chol esev hasadeh terim yitzmach. And all the seeds which are in potential in the ground could not grow yet. Why not? Ki lo himtir Hashem Elokim ala haaretz. God had not brought rain on the ground. V'adam ayin la'avod et ha'adamah. So what happened on day 3 in inverted commas? Everything in potential was there. Everything was below the surface of the ground. One thing was missing. Rain. When does HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring rain? When there's a human being. Let's see Rashi. V'chol esev hasadeh, line number 66. V'chol esev siach hasadeh terim yeh ba'aretz. Terim yitzmach. Adayin lo tzamach. Line 68. ובשלישי שכתב בתוצאי הארץ, על פתח הקרקע עמדו עד יום שישי. They stood on the surface of the ground. כי לא המטיר. because הקדוש ברוך הוא hadn't brought rain. ומה טעם לא המטיר? לפי שאדם עין לעבוד את האדמה. Man was not there now to toil, but it doesn't mean to toil. What does Rashi say? ואין מכיר בטובתם של גשמים. There was nobody there to appreciate rain. וכשבא אדם ויודע שהם צורך לעולם, when man arrives in the world and knows that there's something missing, וידע שהם צורך לעולם, התפלל עליהם וירדו, וצמחו האילנות והדשאים. What does this mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't bring things into the ground, into the world, if they are not appreciated. Man appreciates what he's got. And Adam Harishon knew that there is something else besides the plants. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs. We need HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring rain. Now, here we come to the concept of weather.
Oh dear. You don't appreciate the light.
Weather.
Thunderstorm.
No, there is one.
Very cloudy.
Right, is weather.
We appreciate life.
Now, it's okay, it doesn't make any difference, okay? You can learn in the dark. What do you think they used to do in... Right. Weather. The Gemara in the beginning of Masechet Ta'anit says one of the keys which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has kept for himself is the key of weather. You ask yourself, what's going to happen? What's the weather going to be on Tu B'Shvat next year? We know the sun will rise on Tu B'Shvat next year. We know the sun will set. But one thing we don't know. No weather forecast guy can ever tell you what's going to happen in a year's time.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
He won't. Won't. Doesn't give it.
What about poor Rich's almanac?
Pardon?
Poor Rich's almanac, it predicts the weather.
Doesn't exist. It's a secret which HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps for himself. Because weather is something which we have to daven for. Weather is something which we have to daven for. We create El Nino, we create all these things. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps the secret of weather only to himself. Now, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps the secret of weather to himself, amongst two other things, which we're not going to go into that, therefore we are judged 4 times a year on that. Our existence, man's existence in the world. Okay? So that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling you. He doesn't bring rain because man needs to ask for rain and he needs to appreciate it. And without man, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do anything. And that is the word lechem. What does the word lechem really mean? Now, the simple explanation is, there are 2 explanations to the words lechem. We translate it as bread, but it doesn't really mean bread. 2 explanations. The first one is, when we speak about lechem, it's the same word as milchama. People fought over bread. Battle of survival is food. Okay, Cain and Hevel. Same thing. Milchama. It's a war. You fight over food. But it's something else. It has an opposite meaning. It means fusion. The word halchama. Anybody heard of it before? When you fuse 2 metals together, it's called halchama. Fusion. Okay? 2 opposing meanings. Milchama, war, and halchama, fusion. Et korbani lachmi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to create this fusion between him and man and Am Yisrael. And that is the word lechem. Lechem is a fusion of 2 powers. That which comes from the ground and that which comes from heaven. In order to make bread, what do you need? You need wheat and water. One from the ground, one from heaven. That is the word lechem. It's a fusion of 2 forces. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, what do we say? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We don't say boreh minei lechamim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created it. No, he's just motzi it. How does he motzi lechem min haaretz? Because we need the rain. So he's the one who's motzi the wheat. Because without him, nothing exists. That is the concept. And the concept of bread, the concept of this word, is actually the mixture of both. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that as long as man wasn't there, Okay? He doesn't give anything because there's nobody to appreciate and nobody to ask. Now we're coming to Tu B'Shvat, the secret of Tu B'Shvat. What is the secret of Tu B'Shvat? Mishnah says the following. Arba'a Rashi Shanim Hem. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs in the Jewish world. First one is Echad Ben Nisan, the first day of Nisan. Rosh Hashanah Limlachim Ulir Galim. What happens on Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Jewish people were created. The creation of the Jewish people. Last week's parsha. The first mitzvah was given when? On Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The Chanukat of the Mishkan, the inauguration of the Mishkan, takes place when? Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Etc., etc., etc. Building of the Beis HaMikdash also begins Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Etc., etc. The whole of the creation of the Jewish world takes place Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's why we count our calendar, months of the year, according to us. We created the Chadashim. Next one. Echad Be'elul. The first day of Elul, Rosh Hashanah L'Maaseh Behemah. Okay? There is a Rosh Hashanah for animals. Think to yourselves, what have we got here? Here the mitzvah is every year we have to give a 10th of the 10th animal we bring to Yerushalayim and eat it there. There is a Rosh Hashanah for thanking Hashem for livestock. We are judged on how the animal life in the world will exist. Remember what we spoke about. We spoke about Domem, the actual world which we live in, the silent world, the world of elements, the world of chemistry, the world of physics, the world of anything which isn't life. That's the world around us. Then we have the life, which is biology, zoology, the life of animals, the life of plants. Okay? That is, the life of animals takes place Rosh Chodesh Elul. We have Be'echad B'Tishri, the life of man, how the world is judged. Humanity vis-a-vis the elements which he lives in. Rain, etc., etc. And then finally, Be'echad B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah La'ilan. 4 Rosh Hashanahs there are. One which relates to the human life, which is Rosh Hashanah, which is Tishri. One which relates to the vegetable life, the life of vegetables and fruits. That's Shvat, which we're going to speak about in a minute. We have the Rosh Hashanah of livestock, animals. We have Rosh Hashanah for Am Yisrael. 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Okay? And each one relates to a separate dimension of creation. Right. Now what happens? There's only one where there's a machloket about, which is regarding Echad B'Shvat. It says the last line, number 78. Ve'echad B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah La'ilan. Beit Shammai hold Kedivrei Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai hold Rosh Hashanah for the vegetable life, the fruit of trees, is on Rosh Chodesh. And Beit Hillel Omrim B'Chamisha Asar Bo. Now, why is this so important? We'll speak about that in a minute. This machloket which takes place between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. But there's something far deeper here. Okay? What's the practical impact on us? So I'm going to give one, which is the most important one, which is the fruits of Orlo. Orlo. What does that mean? The minute you've planted a tree, fruit tree. You're allowed to eat from the fruits of the tree after 3 years, plus another year which is called Netaravai. Basically, only 4 years after the tree has been in the ground, then you can begin to eat its fruits. Now, we're not talking about, let me just say something, when you buy a fruit tree from a mashtela, okay, it's in the soil already, and it's grown in the soil. Therefore, when you move it over to your garden, you've got to know when it was first planted in the mashtela. When it was first planted, and that's why all the big mashtelot know when each tree was actually planted in the soil, the seeds of that tree was put in. Okay? I can tell you that firsthand because I've got family who deals in it. Okay? But that is, and therefore when is the Rosh Hashanah? The minute it's past Tu B'Shvat, after 4 years, okay, then you can eat from the fruit of the tree. That's where Orla, Tu B'Shvat is so important. It takes place, that means you plant it, let's say in 2024, okay, 25th of January 2024, okay, Tu B'Shvat, 4 years time, Tu B'Shvat is the birthday of the tree. It doesn't have to have full 3.5 years, full 4 years. You always go by, what? Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat after 4 years, after 3.5 years, will already be the 4th year. Right. That's where Tu B'Shvat is so important. And as far as Dinei Masrot, which I'm not going to go into now. Okay? Now, what do we mean by this? Therefore, Rosh Hashanah, Tu B'Shvat, is the day when fruits are allowed to be eaten for the first time. Fruits are allowed to be eaten on Tu B'Shvat for the first time. Now, what do we mean? What's so important about this? Pardon?
No, I say, so what?
So what? Okay, and I'll explain to you, so what? Okay, because there's a deep parallel between history and geography. And now we're going to go into it. But to be able to understand this, the parallels here, we've got something which is very, very interesting. The machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, whether it's Rosh Chodesh Shvat or whether it is what? The 15th day of Shvat. Potential versus reality. Rosh Chodesh is the day when the moon potentially renews itself. Okay? When do you see the reality of the moon? The 15th day of the month. 15th day of the month is the day when the reality comes into being. Potential versus reality. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu planted at the beginning of creation, what did he do? He planted everything on the surface. Potentially everything was ready. But in reality, when does it take place? When everything grows, when you see it. Okay, we have potential energy and we have kinetic energy. Potential, reality. Now, what do we go after when we see a tree? Now, when we see a tree in the winter, now, what do you see in that tree? There's a potential. We don't see the reality. The reality will be of an olive tree only next year, Sukkot. Okay? A date tree. When you see the dates? You'll see the dates in August. When will you see a vineyard? You go past a vineyard now. What do you see there? Dead branches. Dead branches. What will come up in the middle of the year? The grapes. At the moment, there's only potential for growth. So when is actually Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot? Says Beis Shammai, Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot is when? Like Rosh Chodesh. When everything you can't see, there's just potential. Only potential. Beis Hillel say, no, we go after reality. When it's real, like the 15th day of the month. And this pardon, what's wrong, Phil? 15th day of the month is real. The moon is there in its maximum. Okay? And what we're going to do is now we're going to see a very interesting argument which took place between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel throughout Shas. Throughout Shas. And the person who wrote it was the editor of this book. His name was, the first editor was Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zevin. Don't know whether any of you have heard of him. He was one of the greatest Rabbonim in Eretz Yisrael. He came from Russia in the 1930s. They managed to save him from communist Russia. He came out here, was brought up by Rav Kook. Rav Kook arranged him a certificate, and he was one of the greatest Rabbonim who created a new style of writing. He was the editor of the Talmudic Encyclopedia. Talmudic Encyclopedia is one of the greatest works which has ever been done. And it was his idea to create it. On every topic in Shas. But every topic. Okay, they're only up to the 50th volume. I've got all 50 at home. It's the only book I buy. Only one I buy. Because it's so unbelievable. Okay? I don't have room in my house, but this I still buy. Okay? And he wrote a fascinating article where he has this ability to analyze machlokot between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai always look at potential. And Beit Hillel look in reality. Okay? Let's give ourselves an example. The best example which takes place is the following. What is the nusach of the brocha of Borei Mo'orei Ha'esh? Now Beit Shammai say Borei Me'or Ha'esh. And Beit Hillel say Borei Mo'orei Ha'esh. Now, Beit Hillel say Mo'orei because in a flame there are mixtures of colors. That's real. But when you look at the color, what is the color? There's only one color. When you put light through prism, then you see multiple. A ray of light is what? Is ma'or, one. We see things in multiple colors, but in depth, everything is one. Okay, take nature. Nature has got multiple facets. But if we believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's one source of everything. The source. And he creates the potential for that reality. That was the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Let's read it inside. Line number 84. ביאור הדברים נראה בהקדם דבריו של הרב זבן בספרו לאור ההלכה. במאמרו המקיף, in his magnificent article, לשיטות בית שמאי ובית הלל. שבית שמאי ובית הלל נחלקו במחלוקת יסודית. One basic argument. מה נחשב יותר, which is more important? הבכוח, potentiality, or בפועל, reality. האם שורש הפעולה, does the source of the action קובע שגם שעדיין לא יצא אל הפועל, even though it has never become into reality, it is there We don't see it. But how do you relate to all different things? Do you relate to the potential, even though there's nothing real there yet? Or, שרק עצם עשיית הפעולה נחשב, וללא הפעולה, without the action, גם השורש אינו כלום. The source of it is meaningless. That means, what's more important? Potential energy or kinetic energy? Potential energy, there's nothing. I don't see it. It's there. But what? It's useless. Has no meaning. It's there. Okay? There's energy, electrical energy, in copper. Until I've created the connection, what is there? It's dead. Nothing. Okay? But there's actually a source of energy in that copper. What do I have to do? I have to connect it. How do I relate to that potential energy? Is it important or not? Now, line number 90. Ha'etz lefi seder gdilato, according to the way it grows, murkav mishorashim. It's made up of roots. Geza. It's, what's it called? It's what? Trunk. Thank you. Anafim. Branches. Peirot. Hashorashim, the roots are the koach shel hapri, they are the potential. The trunk. The roots and the trunk are the potential. Sheken biladehem, without them, ein etz. Ein anafim, ve'ein peirot. Etz, a tree, sheshorsho met, where the roots are dead, eno yachol laniv peirot. Etz, sheshoratav chalashim, the shorish is weak, Perotav ktanim v'chivrim. The fruits are small and withered away. Everything depends on what? On the roots. But to me, they're underground. So what does it mean to me? How do I relate to them? V'lachen bet Shammai hasovrim shemalat habekoach ha'ikar, that the potential is the most important. Chashivut zman hachatala shel ha'etz, the time when they actually begin, the power begins to work within the tree. Nikla lefi zman chanata shel hashorish, goes by the roots. Always you look at the roots. And what begins is not the flowering of the almond, or what takes place deep down. So how do I relate to that? So Beit Shammai always go to the potential. Just like the new moon. The new moon, you see a glimmer of light, but it's useless. It doesn't light up the night. It will only, what? It will only light up everything on the 15th. That's when the light is greatest. And therefore, what does he say? Kva b'shat chanatat shoresh, when the shoresh, the roots begin to rejuvenate, then that is the new moon, the new year. Do I look at the shoresh, the root, or do I look at when the flowering begins? That is the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. And it's a very, very deep argument. Okay? And it affects everything. That is Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat, the 15th. Now look at, besides Rosh Hashanah, Pesach is when? 15th. Sukkot, 15th. Purim in Shushan, 15th. Tu B'Shvat, 15th. They're all on the 15th. Because everything follows reality. Everything.
But you still need, you need both Beit Shammai and Beit
You need Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel.
Like Kabbalistic.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not talking about, but in every single one of us, it's like that. In every single human being has got potential. Okay, we always speak about our kids. Look what potential you've got. Okay, boy, you could be amazing. What happens? He still remains a, what's it called? Schmuck. Okay? But that's what happens. Okay? That means bring out your potential. Your drive is to bring your potential into reality. So Bet Shammai always look at the potential. Okay? Always. What there is behind the scenes and what can be. And Beit Hillel, me, come and say, no, im ein ani li, mili. Who is there besides me? I've got to show who I am. I can't hide everything. Okay? Now, the essence. What's wrong?
No, how does he explain
How does he explain
Nisan, Elul, and Tishrei?
Pardon? Correct.
I mean,
the Rosh Hashanah takes place according to potential. When was the potential created into reality of Am Yisrael? Pesach. The going out of Egypt. Think to yourself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Am Yisrael, now this is the beginning, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's the time you're judged. Because you are judged on your potential. You are judged on your potential. That's how you're judged. You're judged on, did you have that, could you bring out your potential into reality? Okay? And every single one of us thinks to himself, look what I could have been. I wasn't. I missed it. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges you not on how real you are, okay, but also on your potential. And that's why the 4 months are always Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the month. But the Chagim, the reality of the world, always takes place on when? The 15th.
You're saying that the trees, it's not a question of judging, it's just a question of...
No, we are judged also on our attitude to trees. We are, everybody is. And that's why the 4 Rosh Hashanahs relate to what? To different, but since within the trees it's not something which is living, it's not my attitude, okay? It's, Beit Hillel say, it's got to be when the flowering begins. It has to be. Because in the world of botany, the world of trees, that's the way we have to look at it. But in all the other ones, Rosh Hashanah is always on the what? On the first day of the month. A new moon. Rosh Hashanah of Aleph B'Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah of what? Of Am Yisrael is when? Is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The reality is when? 15th day. Always. There was only one which wasn't, which was Shavuos, Matan Torah. Because that had to be 50 days afterwards. Okay, and that's why it's not dependent on what? On a day of the month. It is the only Chag which doesn't have day of the month. It's 50 days after Yetzias Mitzrayim. One more. 1 minute before we finish. And here you'll see the pattern. One more Chag, which took place on the 15th. Tu B'Av. Now, Tu B'Av is the most amazing one. Why is Tu B'Av the most amazing one? How do we define Tu B'Shvat? The day when really we can eat the first fruits of the tree. What took place on Tu B'Av? Let's read the Mishnah, the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, line number 104. Lo hayu yamim tovim li Yisrael, 15 B'Av v'Yom HaKippurim. The happiest day of the Jewish people in the time of the Shoftim was Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. Bishlama Yom Kippur, I understand Yom Kippur, Mishum de'beit beis slicha u'mechila, the day when HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgives us. Yom shenitna bo luchot ha'achronot, the day when the second tablets of stone were giving. Ele 15 B'Av, Mai, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Yom sheutru shvatim lavo ze b'zeh. The day when all the Jewish people could intermarry. It happened twice in the history of the Jewish people. Once, the first time it happened, was in order to create that each tribe would start off at the same point. Remember, a boy marries a girl. The girl is from a different tribe. What happens? Movement of property. Therefore, the first generation was that each tribe, and that's the story of Benot Tzlofchad, the girls had to marry from the same tribe. In order to create what? Absolute equilibrium within the properties of each tribe. the borders of the tribes of Am Yisrael were based on all those who were going into Eretz Yisrael at that time. And the minute you intermarried and there'd beef, like the story of Tzlofchad, where only had daughters, if they would have married into other tribes, what would have happened? They wouldn't have been the same size, because that property would go over to another tribe, and that wouldn't be fair. So therefore, the first generation had to be what? The same. Only within the same tribe. The second time this happened was after the civil war with Binyamin. There was a terrible civil war in the time of the book of Shoftim, where Binyamin, the tribe of Binyamin, did a terrible thing, and there was a cherem, they were excommunicated, and a few years later, and therefore only the tribe of Binyamin, nobody could intermarry into the tribe of Binyamin. In the time of a few years later, the excommunication fell down. So what took place on Tu B'Av? It's a day when Am Yisrael could intermarry, could become one. One. That is Tu B'Av. The Jewish people as a nation become a reality amongst themselves. Tu B'Shvat, 6 months later, is what? A time when Jewish people can eat from the first fruits. This is the concept of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat, Tu B'Av, Tu B'Nisan, Tu B'Adar, Tu B'Tishrei. The 15th day of the month represents the real world. Who are we? What is our Mesiras Nefesh? Are we willing to go out of Egypt? Are we willing to go into the desert? Are we willing to fight against Achashverosh and Haman? Are we willing to be one nation, Tu B'Av? Are we willing to appreciate the world which we live in, Tu B'Shvat? That is the essence of Tu B'Shvat. Bet Shammai, let me just finish. Look in the world of potential. The beginning of the month. Rosh Hashanah this, Rosh Hashanah that, Rosh Hashanah that. Beit Hillel always looked into the world of reality. Who we really are. Yeah.
I was just going to say that the conversation convinces me that Nechemya is simple on the first day and the fifth day.
Correct. That's why you have Rosh Chodesh also. Say hello.